Long ago, there were two groups of people. They were called the Israelites and the Philistines. These two groups were not friends. They were enemies, and they often fought each other. One day, their armies gathered for a very big battle. The Israelites set up their camp on one hill. The Philistines set up their camp on another hill. Between the two hills, there was a wide open space. This space was called the Valley of Elah. It was a quiet place, but soon it would see a great contest. Both armies prepared for war, and everyone felt the tension. The leader of the Israelite army was King Saul. He was a tall king, and he had many soldiers. His soldiers looked across the valley at the Philistine army. They knew a battle was coming soon. The Philistines were strong and fierce fighters. They had come ready to win. So the two armies stood on their hills, watching each other. The valley lay silent between them for many days. Each morning the sun would rise on the waiting soldiers. Each evening it would set, and still they waited for the fight to begin. The air was filled with an unspoken fear. The Valley of Elah was a wide, sweeping place. Green grass covered parts of it, and a small stream trickled through. But now, it was a place of waiting and worry. The soldiers on both sides checked their weapons. They sharpened their swords and polished their shields. They talked in hushed voices about the enemy. They wondered who would be brave enough to start the fight. The Philistines seemed very confident. The Israelites felt a growing sense of dread. They hoped for a miracle, but what could they do against such a powerful foe? King Saul and his men knew this was a serious moment. If they lost this battle, their land could be taken. Their people could be in great danger. The Philistines wanted to rule over them. So the Israelites prayed for help. They hoped for courage. They looked to their king for guidance. But even King Saul was worried. He saw the strength of the Philistines. He knew this would be a very hard fight. The days passed slowly in the Valley of Elah, and the shadow of the coming battle grew longer and darker for everyone there. From the Philistine camp, a great champion came forward every day. His name was Goliath, and he was from a town called Gath. Goliath was not like other men. He was a giant, incredibly tall and strong. He stood over 9 feet tall. Just looking at him made people tremble with fear. He wore a heavy bronze helmet on his head to protect it. His body was covered in a coat of mail, made of many small pieces of bronze. This armor weighed a very large amount, more than a man could easily carry. He was a fearsome sight for anyone to behold. Goliath carried powerful weapons too. He had a big bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. In his hand, he held a spear. The spear was so thick and heavy, its shaft was like a weaver's beam. The iron point of his spear alone weighed many pounds. A soldier walked in front of Goliath, carrying his huge shield. This shield was big enough to protect the giant's whole body. Every morning and every evening, Goliath would stride out into the valley. He would stand there, strong and proud, looking at the Israelite camp with scorn in his eyes. For 40 long days, Goliath came out and shouted his challenge. His voice was like thunder booming across the valley. He would yell, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I overcome him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." He dared them to fight him one-on-one. The Israelite soldiers heard Goliath's words every day. They saw his massive size and his fearsome weapons, and they were terrified. Not one soldier in King Saul's army dared to accept the challenge. Even the bravest among them felt their hearts sink. Goliath would laugh at their fear. He would mock them and their God. He would say, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." The Israelites felt ashamed and helpless. Their spirits were low, and fear gripped the entire camp. Far away from the Valley of Elah, in the little town of Bethlehem, lived a young boy named David. He was the youngest son of a man named Jesse. David was a shepherd. He spent his days in the fields, taking care of his father's sheep. He protected them from wild animals like lions and bears. He made sure they had fresh grass to eat and clean water to drink. David was not a soldier. He was young, with a kind face and bright eyes. He loved to play his harp and sing songs to God while he watched his flock. One day, David's father Jesse called for him. Jesse had 3 older sons who were soldiers in King Saul's army. They were at the battlefront in the Valley of Elah. Jesse was worried about them. He said to David, Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread. Go quickly to the camp to your brothers. Also, take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are doing and bring back some token from them. Some news to show they are all right. Jesse wanted to know if his sons were safe. So, David obeyed his father. Early the next morning, he left the sheep with another keeper. He loaded up the food and set off on his journey. It was a long walk to the valley of Elah. He was just a boy, but he was responsible and brave. He carried the provisions his father had given him. He thought about his brothers and hoped they were well. He did not know what he would find when he reached the army camp. He was simply doing what his father asked, a faithful son on an important errand. When David arrived at the edge of the camp, he could hear a great commotion. The soldiers were shouting and moving into their battle lines. It seemed like the battle was about to begin. David ran towards the camp to find his brothers. He left his supplies with the keeper of the baggage. He wanted to greet his brothers and give them the food from home. He was eager to see them. He did not yet know about the giant Goliath or the fear that filled the Israelite camp. He was just a shepherd boy arriving at a place of great tension. As David was talking with his brothers, something happened. The giant Goliath stepped out from the Philistine lines. He began to shout his usual defiant words. His voice was loud and full of pride. He challenged the army of Israel, just as he had done for 40 days. "Choose a man! Let him come and fight me!" Goliath boomed. All the Israelite soldiers who heard him were filled with dismay. They looked at the huge giant and they backed away in great fear. They had heard this terrible challenge many times before. David saw the soldiers running. He heard Goliath's booming voice and his insulting words. He could not believe what he was seeing and hearing. He asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine? What will be given to the one who takes away this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine anyway? Why is he allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" David was not afraid. He was shocked and angry that this man was mocking God and his people. The soldiers told David about the king's reward. They said King Saul would give great riches to the man who killed Goliath. The king would also give his daughter in marriage to that man, and that man's family would be free from paying taxes in Israel. But even with these promises, no one dared to step forward. They were all too scared of the giant. David listened carefully. He felt a fire burning inside him. He believed that God was much stronger than any giant, no matter how big or fierce he looked. David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard him talking with the soldiers. Eliab became angry with David. He said, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." But David was not there just to watch. He felt God was calling him to do something. He replied, "Now what have I done? Can't I even speak?" He turned away from his brother and kept asking about the challenge, his heart set on a brave idea. Some of the soldiers heard what David was saying, and honestly, they were surprised by his brave words. They went and told King Saul about this young man. So King Saul sent for David, and soon David was standing before the king of Israel. David looked at King Saul and spoke with respect, but also with great courage. He said, "Let no one's heart fail because of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." King Saul looked at David and, well, he saw a young shepherd boy, not a trained soldier. He did not look like someone who could fight a giant. King Saul said to David, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine to fight him. You are only a young man. He has been a warrior from his youth. He is strong and experienced in battle." Saul was worried for David. He really did not want to send a boy to his death. But David was not discouraged by the king's words. He knew where his strength came from. He had faced danger before and God had always been with him. He was ready to tell the king about his experiences. David then told King Saul his story. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," David explained. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and I struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." David spoke with great confidence. David continued, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." King Saul listened to David's words. He heard the faith in David's voice. He saw the courage in David's eyes. Perhaps this young shepherd boy was the answer to their prayers. Saul was moved by David's unwavering trust in God. So King Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." He gave David his blessing to face the giant. King Saul wanted to help David prepare for the fight, so he offered David his own armor. He dressed David in his own tunic, put a bronze helmet on David's head, and also gave David his coat of armor to wear. Then he strapped his own sword to David's side. This was the armor of a king. Honestly, the very best armor in the Israelite army. It was heavy and strong, designed to protect a warrior in battle. Saul thought this would give David a better chance against the mighty Goliath. David tried to walk around wearing the king's armor, but it was just too big for him. It was heavy and awkward, and David was not used to wearing such things. He had never fought in armor before, and he could hardly move. He knew he could not fight well if he was uncomfortable and weighed down. Good armor was important for a soldier, but David was a shepherd. He needed to use what he knew best. He needed to be quick and agile, not slow and clumsy in heavy metal. So David said to King Saul, "I cannot go in these. I'm not used to them." He knew that his true strength did not come from armor or swords. It came from God, and it came from his own skill with the tools he used every day. So David took off the king's heavy helmet. He unbuckled the coat of mail and laid aside the royal sword. He chose not to use the weapons of a soldier. Instead, he would use the simple tools of a shepherd. He trusted in what was familiar to him. David picked up his shepherd's staff, the one he always carried. Then he went down to the stream that flowed through the valley of Elah. He looked carefully among the stones in the stream bed and chose 5 smooth, round stones. He put these 5 stones into his shepherd's bag, which he slung over his shoulder. In his hand, he held his sling. This was his weapon. He had used it many times to protect his sheep from wild animals, and he knew how to use it well. With his staff, his sling, and his 5 smooth stones, David was ready to face the giant. David walked out from the Israelite camp and headed towards the place where Goliath stood waiting. He was calm and steady, with his shepherd's bag at his side. Goliath, the Philistine giant, saw David approaching and looked at him with contempt. He saw a young boy, ruddy and handsome, carrying only a staff and a sling. He didn't see a warrior ready for battle. Goliath felt insulted that the Israelites would send such a small young opponent to fight him. He was expecting a great champion, not a mere shepherd. Goliath shouted at David in anger, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" He roared, and his voice echoed across the valley. Then the giant cursed David by his Philistine gods. He threatened David, saying, "Come here to me, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Goliath was sure he would win easily. He thought this boy was no match for his size, his strength, or his heavy weapons. He prepared to crush this small challenger quickly. But David was not afraid of Goliath's angry words or his terrible threats. He stood bravely before the giant and called back to Goliath with a clear, strong voice. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," David declared. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." Then, as Goliath moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. He reached into his shepherd's bag, took out one of his smooth stones, and placed the stone carefully into his sling. He began to swing the sling around his head, faster and faster. Then, with all his might, David slung the stone. The stone flew through the air with great speed and accuracy. It struck Goliath right in the middle of his forehead. The stone sank deep into the giant's head, and Goliath stumbled. He fell face down on the ground with a mighty thud. The giant was defeated. When Goliath, the mighty champion of the Philistines, fell to the ground, a hush fell over both armies. The giant lay still. The shepherd boy, David, had done the impossible. David did not have a sword of his own, so he ran quickly to where Goliath lay. He stood over the fallen giant and took hold of Goliath's own huge sword. He pulled it out from its sheath. It was a heavy, powerful weapon. With Goliath's own sword, David made sure the giant was truly dead, ending the threat he posed. When the Philistine soldiers saw that their hero, their champion Goliath, was dead, they were filled with terror. Their courage vanished completely. They had trusted in Goliath's strength and believed he was unbeatable. Now, their strongest warrior was defeated by a young shepherd boy. Fear gripped their hearts. They knew they could not win without Goliath. So the Philistine army turned around and began to run away as fast as they could, fleeing back towards their own land in panic and disarray. The Israelite soldiers, who had been so afraid, watched in amazement. When they saw the Philistines running, a great shout of joy and triumph rose from their ranks. Their fear was replaced with sudden courage and excitement. King Saul and his men charged after the fleeing Philistines. They chased them for many miles, winning a great victory that day. The Lord had given them success through the bravery of one young shepherd. The long days of fear and waiting in the valley of Elah were finally over. That day, Israel won a very important battle. The threat of the Philistines was pushed back. The people of Israel celebrated their amazing victory. They praised God for helping them, and they honored David, the young shepherd who had shown such incredible faith and courage. He had faced the giant when everyone else was too afraid. David became a hero in Israel. His bravery changed the course of the war. The name of David would be remembered for many, many years because of what he did in the valley of Elah. The story of David and Goliath is more than just an exciting tale. It teaches us many important lessons. One of the biggest lessons is that courage does not depend on how big or strong you are. David was only a young shepherd boy. Goliath was a huge, trained warrior. But David had a brave heart. He was not afraid to face a giant because he trusted in something greater than himself. True courage comes from within, from your spirit and your beliefs, not just from physical power. Another important lesson is about faith. David had strong faith in God. He believed that God would help him. This faith gave him the strength to face Goliath when all the soldiers of Israel were too scared. David said, "The Lord, who rescued me from the lion and the bear, will rescue me from this Philistine." His trust in God was bigger than his fear of the giant. This teaches us that when we have faith, we can overcome things that seem impossible. Faith can help us conquer our own Goliaths in life, the big challenges and fears we all face. The story also shows us that wisdom and skill can be more powerful than brute strength. Goliath had heavy armor and big weapons, but David used what he knew best, his sling and a smooth stone. He didn't try to be like Goliath. He didn't use King Saul's armor because it wasn't right for him. He used his own skills, the ones he had practiced as a shepherd. This tells us to use our own unique talents and to think cleverly. Sometimes a simple tool used wisely is much better than a mighty weapon used without skill. Finally, David's story encourages us to believe in ourselves and what we can do, especially when God is with us. David was young and his own brother doubted him. King Saul also doubted him at first, but David believed he could make a difference. He stepped forward when no one else would. This story reminds us that anyone, no matter how small or young, can do great things. God can use ordinary people to achieve extraordinary outcomes.